So I'm Andrew, and I run a local games publishing company called Terrible Games that has a rather niche interest in political and subversive board games, mostly. We came by this not really through choice. It was because we also accidentally designed a board game called War on Terror, the board game known as that. And it was really the response to this game that kind of propelled us along, and also is the foundation of the what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. I always have to come clean. I'm afraid it's not going to be 5 minutes, but 5 minutes sounded snappy, and I thought having a title with both the words history and board games in, I'd face a wide-scale rebellion if I actually told you my words. Sorry. 6.5 to be precise. It didn't fit on one line. So I don't know if you're familiar with Water board game, or how familiar you are, but it has the rather dubious honour of being the only board game in history to be branded an offensive weapon by the police. Just in case you think I'm joking, this is the official police photograph that Kent Police released to the media. This was back in 2008, after they raided an environmental camp, looking for weapons and criminal tools. As you can see, police are keeping our streets safe as ever. But that wasn't the craziest response. It was just one of the many weird and mad responses to the game. We got called sick. We said that the board game would help terrorists. We got banned. 1 year we were banned from pretty much every single major toy and game fair in the world. We were barred from membership to the British Toy and Hobby Association, which you can imagine what you've heard. And then, conversely, when things kind of all the fury died down, it went equally weird, just in the positive direction, and the game ended up on kind of syllabuses of numerous university courses around the world, and it's in the permanent collections of the Imperial War Museum and the Bodleian Library and things like that. It's got exhibited in a major exhibition at the Berlin Academy of Arts as well. So this kind of got us thinking, what is it about this strange medium, this apparently kind of innocuous medium of war games, that inspires and provokes such extreme actions kind of on both ends? And that's what I'm going to talk to you about, finally get around to it. Now, when we made this, we kind of knew very little about game design, and the company, people might argue, still don't. But what we found out is that we're actually part of quite a long tradition of board games using this kind of tool to examine the world around us. So the first thing to kind of appreciate really is just how old board games are. The first recorded board game, which this is called Senet, it's from ancient Egypt, and it dates back to about 3,500 BC. Senet was culturally very important, and we know this because it was found in the tombs of pharaohs. In fact, this one's from Tutankhamun's tomb. So this dates back to kind of pre-dynasty ages. And as best as historians can divine, Senet was about working your way to the afterlife through a very tedious mechanism going round and round this board, picking up things that you need in order to finally progress to the afterlife. I'd like to think that kind of mind-numbing repetition was in itself a kind of a comment on the absurd coincidence of life, but that might be reading a bit too much into it. But anyway, as well as kind of Senet, other early board games, really early, a kind of backgammon, which is like 3000 BC, a game called Parcheesi, which originated in India, which we know today as Ludo. That was about 2000 BC, and then chess appeared sometime shortly after AD. And these games, you may think, well, they're just abstract strategy games, you know, how do they relate to the real world? But actually, in their origins, they were heavily themed, these games, and the pieces were often highly decorative, and they related to subjects such as kind of civil order, or arranging your armies, or of course, chess is abstracted war. So games in their origin, or board games, were very rarely just about kind of moving pebbles around and trying to beat the other person. They were about mirroring the real world in some way and looking at it. So, jumping forward in time a few years, who knows what this game is? No, it's not. No, it's so wrong. No, this is Moksha Patam. This is another ancient Indian game, and it's about, actually it concerns itself with karma and Hindu morality. And what you do in this game is you work your way up, aiming for salvation, but the snakes take you back to the beginning. You have to kind of relive your mistakes again, and eventually through progressing through these virtues, you will reach salvation. It did, of course, become Snakes and Ladders when it was imported into Victorian England in the 1890s. And this is how we recognise it today, but the Victorians loved this game, and they also copied over the morality of the game, and they explicitly labelled the snakes and the ladders. They labelled the ladders virtues like, you know, obeying your parents or patience, and the snakes were spite or avarice or listening to anything by Robin Thicke. And through playing this kind of Victorian morality game, kids were meant to kind of become better people. And in fact, in the 1800s, I guess, there was an explosion in board game publishing, and like I say, Victorians loved them, and almost without exception, these were all heavily didactic games aimed at children, kind of to trick them into kind of learning something. They were really very poorly disguised exercises. This is a very famous example for the Mansion of Bliss. I'll just read out how the Mansion of Bliss was pitched back in the 1850s. Designed for the amusement of youth with a view to promote the progressive improvement of the juvenile mind and to deter them from pursuing the dangerous paths of vice. As you can imagine, Victorian evenings flew by. I have to tell you, the inventor of this game also is Thomas Newton. He also invented a game called Virtue Rewarded, Vice Punished. You might want to take a moment to, regardless of the faults of your own parents, just be thankful you didn't grow up in the Newton household. So anyway, this was very much the shape of games at the end of the 1800s. And then we come into the 20th century. Suddenly kind of board games got teeth, and they turned a bit political. So what's this game? No, you're wrong again. It's so lucky I'm here giving you a lesson in history, because you would fail the history of board game exams, my friends. No, this is called the Landlord's Game, and it was designed in 1904 by a woman called Elizabeth McGee, American woman. And it was in fact a protest game against it was a protest against Georgism, which was the economic structure at the time. Essentially an anti-capitalist game, and its goal was to explore and exploit how the owning classes, the landlords, got rich off the back of the poorer working renting classes. And it did this very effectively. It was a brutally kind of unfair game. And of course, it was also quite subversive until it got bought up by the Parker brothers in 1935 for the princely sum of $500, and was turned into, it's very ironically, a massive celebration of all those things that the Landlord's Game was actually railing against, and is now the most hated game in the world. Just summarising. So in the wake of Monopoly, for the rest of the 1900s, games started kind of appearing, covering all manner of kind of political subjects and propaganda, and these ranged from the rather kind of extremely distasteful, Juden raus, that means Jews get out, is how you might translate that. This was the game from Nazi Germany, as you might imagine. Incidentally, the Nazis disowned us, and they were like, well, it's too serious, it doesn't represent us very well. But it was designed as kind of propaganda. This is a game about the racially troubled Columbia University protests in America, the anti-Vietnam protests. And this slogan was daubed on the walls, and the Black Panthers took it up afterwards. There were games about mutually assured nuclear destruction. This was very popular in the 70s among a certain group of people. Corrupt banana republics, and yeah, I mean, literally kind of all subjects, all shapes and sizes. They weren't all niche games either, like Junta and Diplomacy, which is very, very kind of serious political game. They're still widely read today, very, very popular. So, I'm not sure I'm doing my time, but this brings us to the question of what makes board games so suited, or apparently so suited, to pose these questions. Why have they always been used to kind of mirror real life, or look at an aspect of real life and present it to people in terms of play? And I'd like to put forward the idea that it's because all play is inherently subversive in a way. Because when you're playing, what you're doing is you're not taking something seriously. And that's quite dangerous. And board games themselves mostly involve some idea of role play. And what role play does is it protects you. It puts you in a safe arena while you're playing. And it means that you can do things like question authority, you can poke fun at stuff, you can be confrontational without actually getting into a fight. All these things can take place within the realm of the game quite safely, and you're protected as a player because you're wearing a mask. And you only need to kind of think about the gestures, this isn't one obviously, to realise the power of the fool, the person who's playing, the person who's kind of sending up reality. Some games, I have to point out, are so good at doing this that they don't even need to be played to impart this social value of freeing people up to look at the world differently. This is a game called Train, which starts to bleed into the arena of performance art. And this was designed in 2008 by an American game designer called Brendan Braithwaite. And in Train, you're given instructions that, as players, you have to kind of get as many of these people into the train, into the destination as possible in as short a time as possible. When the first player arrives at the destination, they realise that they're shipping their encounters to Auschwitz. And then the game kind of takes on a whole new kind of flavour, and some people end up kind of sabotaging their train, some people just continue obeying the instructions, literally kind of following orders, because that's what the game tells you to do. It's kind of more art piece than a game. And in just telling you this, you probably don't need to play it. You're not going to get much more out of playing the game. But you understand that this is there as an alternative kind of prism at looking at history rather than just opening a history book. Also, a bit of kind of just self-publicity, I have to mention, this is a game that we made. And although it's just one sheet of paper, I know for a fact it's many people's favourite game of ours. It's called Meta Kettle, and it's a game to be played when you're being kettled to pass the time until you can be released. And it's about kettling other people when you're in a kettle. And to my knowledge, it has been cited in kind of more papers than it has been played. In fact, I don't think it's ever been played. But I think the reason this is so popular is just because the existence of a game like this automatically turns any kettling situation into a potential play situation, which in turn undermines the authority and the danger the authority of the police represent. So games have this extraordinary power to interpret the world in a way that other creative mediums, more static mediums, don't. So just wrapping up, what I'd like to kind of impart is that all these games that I've kind of briefly introduced you to, they share this, they share one thing in common, and they seek to kind of miniaturize and represent in microcosm an aspect of the real world, the macrocosm, and they hope that a truth will emerge through this, and critically the truth is expected to emerge by players interacting with this tool. It's not prescribed, except maybe in the example of the Victorian horribly didactic games, but most of the time it's not kind of written down how you should learn from this game. It emerges through play, it emerges through interaction with this tool. And it would be very nice if you could bear that in mind next time you're designing a game, next time you're consuming a game, next time you're just looking at a game, that the latent power and the impact of subversion